I'm here to talk to you about the acceptable use policy. What is it and why do we care? Well, the acceptable use policy was established by our Las Lunas School Board. Here's a picture of them and our superintendent, Dana Sanders, about the guidelines for the use of computers and internet access. This includes your MacBooks that we're so excited you have this year. You guys at the orientation for the MacBooks, I talked to each of you and your parents about reading the acceptable use policy and agreeing to it. So you all have already agreed to the acceptable use policy. So let's go ahead and review what it's about. The acceptable use policy is designed to show us that our district system should only be used for the purpose of research, education, and school-related business and operations. There's a few minor exceptions to that, but for the most part, if it's not related to school, you probably shouldn't be using your MacBook for it. I want to remind you that technology is a privilege and not a right. The district is trying to protect legitimate users or people who should be using the MacBooks by preventing things that are abusing resources. So things like excessive streaming or downloading can take up resources that limit other students' ability to use the devices or slow down the internet for everyone. So I just want to remind you that the acceptable use policy reminds us that it's a privilege and not a right to have these computers. The acceptable use policy also discusses something called netiquette. Netiquette or network etiquette, which is shortened to netiquette, has some general guidelines. We should always be polite and kind to others. Just because we're not face to face with them, it doesn't mean our words still don't hurt. So we need to be careful about what we send through the computer. We also need to use appropriate language and shouldn't be using suggestive language or pictures on these devices at any time or inappropriate language. And then illegal activities are always forbidden with these devices. Here's another part. So airdropping, internet, flash drive, downloading. Every single thing that's on your MacBook needs to be scanned for viruses and malware. Just because somebody airdrops it to you doesn't mean you should accept it, or just because somebody gives you a flash drive, you probably shouldn't plug it in if your friend says, hey, here, take this file from me. That can be really unsafe and damage your computer. So you need to be careful about the source of what you're receiving when people are airdropping or you're downloading from the internet or using flash drives. Another part of the acceptable use policy is your password. You're responsible for your passwords at all times. Be cautious about writing them down or leaving them laying around. Remember that you're always responsible for anything done with your password, even if you had accidentally shared your password or purposely shared your password with someone else. You become responsible for their use on these devices. I talked a little bit earlier about streaming music or resources that hog up a lot of internet. You're really not supposed to be maintaining files of music, photos, or other softwares or games that weren't provided by the district. These can hog up space on your computer. They can cause your computer to run slow. They can also be copyright violations when you have large amounts of music or games that were illegally acquired. So you just need to be careful about getting and storing those things on your device. Just a reminder, games, streaming music, and YouTube. These are activities that should not take place on campus at school ever. Games, streaming music, and watching videos on YouTube for non-educational purposes are a violation of the policies. Now, if you're at home and you'd like to play a game on your MacBook, that's probably acceptable as long as it's not distracting you from the task of doing your homework, or if it's a educational minded game, okay? Shouldn't be playing multi-role playing games on these devices or, staying up all night playing games on these devices. So some use at home in moderation is okay, but it shouldn't be widespread and all the time. And you need to be careful not to do it at school. Again, YouTube, you need to be careful about what you're going to. You need to also make sure that you're not streaming, sending, or forwarding any kind of memes or videos that would be inappropriate or hurtful to others. You need to be careful. You shouldn't be using social media at all on these devices. And you need to be careful that your use is not upsetting or hurting another person's feeling, and that you're not forwarding anything through these devices in our network that could be offensive or hurtful to other students or other members of our community. I want to remind you that your computers are filtered and blocked at all time. We are required by law to protect you from certain things that are listed here on this screen. So you will get website blocked access. If you feel like the website blocked is an error, and it is an educational website that you're supposed to be going to, you can try again and then report it. But you shouldn't be searching for illegal or inappropriate material on these devices. If that does get through, or you know someone that's doing that, you need to let us know right away, because you can be complicit or part of the other person's violation of the AUP policy if you don't report it. So things like getting to inappropriate areas of the internet need to be reported immediately, or you could be responsible as well as the person who actually violated the AUP. I want to remind you that using any kind of proxies to bypass filtering and security is strictly prohibited. You should never use anything to get around the systems or allow you to download. That's a very serious violation of the AUP policy and can result in a suspension of your use of the machine. If you've already done something to bypass our filters and our proxying to get things down on your computer or to download things or get to places, I would encourage you to self-report that to Marilyn in room 706. She can help you get it off your machine. It's much better to self-report that you've accidentally already done this as opposed to us finding out later about it. I want to remind you that your computers are not private. They are public, and we can scan them, view them, access them at any time. So we can also see your history of where you've been. If you do anything illegal, it'll be reported to authorities. If you do anything in violation of the AUP, it'll be reported to the administration and dealt with through a disciplinary measure. Again, filtering and proxies is the big issue here. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, I want to remind you that that you should never plug a personal device into the computer. This shares all the information from one device to the other. Even if you're just charging your cell phone, it can cause all your pictures, all your contacts, all your text messages, all your social media history to run through the network of Los Lunas schools. And then you've just accidentally violated the AUP, and you've lost your confidentiality of what's on your phone or your privacy. You've essentially given us access to your phone and everything on it. So you want to be very, very cautious to ever plug in a phone to these Mac devices. And you should never put any personal information on a website unless you're directly asked to do so by a teacher or a staff member. I want to remind you that you shouldn't be using the computers to disseminate religious, political, or proselytizing materials. Those can be a violation of the separation of church and state, and they can also be against the school policies on sharing those informations. A little shout out to my friends who gave us a meme related to Minecraft. That's a separate issue that has been dealt with separately. Okay, I want to remind you that plagiarism and cheating or using technology is prohibited. We should never be airdropping our homework to someone else to copy off of. We shouldn't be sending pictures of work between students using these devices. We shouldn't be copy pasting from websites and putting them in. We want to make sure that all our work is a way for us to learn, and that we're sharing information that reflects our knowledge and not just knowledge that we copied from someone else. So I want to remind you that cheating or using technology to share answers is a violation of the AUP, but it's also an academic dishonesty thing that can be grounds for a referral to the office. Hacking and vandalism to the computer is always inappropriate. That one's a little more obvious. You should never be trying to get into other people's machines or devices or files. Copyright laws, I briefly discussed that before. You're all responsible for following copyright laws. That includes copying and pasting text, or downloading illegal copies of videos or games that shouldn't be on your device. Those can be grounds for disciplinary action in school or reporting to the law if it's a serious copyright violation. So you need to be careful about your academic dishonesty or honesty, and making sure that your work and the things you're downloading reflects you. I want to remind you that you need to be careful about receiving documents, games, files from people that are either prohibited executable. You shouldn't be running software on your computer that hasn't been approved or vetted through the technology department or your teacher. It can cause issues with, file sharing and messing up other files and downloading resources. Now, in the case of Minecraft, the district has decided to unblock Minecraft with the expectation that it's not used during class time. Minecraft should be used at home if you decide to use Minecraft. You shouldn't be wasting time in class or avoiding classwork or engaged in games or playing with these devices during class. That's defiant to your teacher and disruptive to the educational process, and we will have to deal with that on an individual basis or a group basis and shut down these files that are against the acceptable use policy. I want to remind you that tampering with or trying to unlock or spring computers from the stuff we put on or access printers that aren't already installed on your computer are against the AUP. At this time, students don't have the ability to print. We're encouraging you to submit things digitally to your teacher and help with the environment and the resources. Discipline. Any kind of issue with the AUP will be reported to the admin and the tech department, and we'll do a full investigation. Consequences can include temporary or permanent loss of privileges and discipline in other ways. We don't want taking these devices or your access away because that's part of your education. So you could face other forms of discipline like lunch detention or in-school suspension for violating the AUP, or loss of privileges with the computer. And then, of course, if you violate any laws using your computer, you can be reported to law enforcement. Thank you for listening to my presentation about the AUP. I want to encourage you to make smart choices and use your device as a resource for education and learning. They're wonderful opportunities. And it was great talking to you guys today. Please see a member of the tech team or your teacher with any more questions. Thank you.